how is damage calculated in ESO? There are two main stats you need to take into consideration. First of all, we will take a look at your max magicka and your max stamina. Your skills do scale with your max magicka and max stamina. So it's not just about weapon and spell damage. These will also increase the damage you do. It's not just a resource for casting spells. Okay. Now what will happen is, let's say you have 15,000 max magicka and that you have 33,000 max stamina. What happens in the game is that the game looks at the two of these and ignores whatever is the lower value. It will only take into consideration the highest of the two values. Okay, and this is sometimes referred to as your max resource. So it will always take a look at whatever is highest. So that's why it's not a good idea, if you want to maximize DPS, to split up between the two. Right. So for example, if you were to have 20,000 of magicka, 20,000 of stamina, it's not very good because it would only consider 20,000 for your damage calculations. Now, the next thing to look at is your spell damage and weapon damage. And this is the same idea here. Okay, so let's say your spell damage is 8,000 and your weapon damage is 4,000. Same thing happens, right? Looks at the two, compares them, gets rid of the smaller one, only takes into consideration the higher one of the two. Okay? So spell damage is the higher one, max stamina is the higher one. An interesting thing is that as of recently, there has been a change where you can combine these in a somewhat unintuitive manner. So you can actually combine max stamina with spell damage as your resources, and it will work. Okay, that was not the case in the past in ESO. It is the case now. So you don't have to stack magicka with spell damage and stamina with weapon damage. Not the case anymore. You can mix and match. Now, so let's say this is what we have. Okay, these are our resources. Now, all of your spells will scale. And how the damage is calculated is, if I have a spell, it will be some number, right? Let's say it's going to be some X value multiplied by my, whatever is my highest stat. So multiplied by 33,000. And then whatever my Y value is. So there will be specific scaling, right? So some number, I don't know, let's say I'm using arbitrary X and Y here, but you know, let's say we have something like 0.1 scaling from max stamina and 0. Or like 1.058 of your second stat, so your weapon and spell damage, right? So something like this. And these two numbers, the 0.1 and the 1.058, I just kind of wrote random numbers here, but they will be different for every single skill. Okay, so let's say this is what, let's say we have something like crystal fragments, right? If I'm playing sorcerer, if I wanted to figure out how much damage my crystal frag is going to do, I would need to take that specific skill's value and multiply by my stats. I can check, if you want, you can check exactly what the values are. There's a website, but just keep in mind that there will always be in a ratio so that a 1 max damage, so either weapon or spell damage, right? 1 max damage is going to be equivalent to 1 10.5 max resource. Okay, so these two, either 1 max damage or 10.5 max resource, or something that might be a little bit easier to see would be 100 max damage, okay, max damage, is going to be equivalent to about 1050 max resource. Okay, so either of these are kind of good threshold to think about. Now, this doesn't mean that if you get yourself 1050 stamina, that you will gain spell damage. Okay, that is not the case. Sometimes people would think, oh, because I have this much stamina, this is also amplifying my spell damage. No. What happens is that how these affect the damage you deal will be roughly equivalent. Okay, so if you were to get 100 spell damage, that's about the same as 1050 max magicka. So you can think about when you have gear, right? One line, you could have 129 weapon and spell damage, right? Or the alternative is 1096 max stamina. Okay, so which of these two is better, right? If you think about it, and if you were to take that into consideration, you will know that the weapon and spell damage is actually a better damage increase than the max stamina. Okay, now, if you want to take a look at the actual values for each skill, you look up UESP build editor. Gonna go up here, click on this, and just down here, you can click on ESO build editor. This is a wonderful tool, and there's a lot of information here. And this takes a little while to load. Just give it some time. I'm going to change my class as soon as it lets me and as it's finished loading. I'm going to change my class to sorcerer, and then I click on skills. We're going to go to, where is it, dark magic? Yeah, dark magic. And let's say we want to figure out how much crystal fragments is actually doing. So any skill that you want to check, you find that skill and you click on these three dots right here. Now there's a bunch of information that you will see, right? But what we're looking for is, as you read through the description, I will zoom in a little bit so we can see a bit better. As you read through the description, conjure dark crystals to bombard an enemy, dealing 1, right? What is this? Dealing 1. So this is where the stats are coming from. If you look down here, the 1 shows up here, and this is what it says, 2,483 magic damage. So this 2,483 is based off of your base stats, right? So if you don't have any gear, if you don't have any food, any buffs, anything, your very basic stuff, very basic stats, this is how much damage you will be doing. But here is the actual formula. Okay, so max stat 0.10691. So my crystal frag is actually going to deal this much. It's going to scale with my max resource, so my max stamina in this current scenario, using this specific scaling number. And 1.1226 max damage. So it's going to be this right here. So if I were to have these stats, max stamina, and 33,000 spell damage, 8,000, this is how much my crystal frag would be doing. Okay? Now it's not as simple. There are a few more things to take into consideration. So this is just for this one specific crystal frag, but there will be other skills will have different values, and we go a bit deeper, right? So this is the first thing we take into consideration, just the flat value of the skill. Now, we need to also take into consideration damage done buffs. Okay, damage done buffs are going to be important, and they will stack. So I sort of have a little bit of a table here at the ready. This is just a small thing I made for myself. It's not fully complete. I might share something like this once I put a little bit more work into this, but this is just for demonstration purposes, so you can understand how these are calculated. Okay, So any damage done buffs. So this is mainly your minor slayer, major slayer buffs, right? There's 5% from minor slayer, 10% from major slayer. Minor berserk, major berserk, more 5 and 10% from these. Okay, now these will add up together to 5 plus 10 plus 5 plus 10. Now for every specific skill, there's other things. For example, Master at Arms and Deadly Aim are your champion point slottables, each buffing it by 6% in the current patch. It might change in the future, it has changed, so these numbers are different, don't be too surprised. I will get rid of these. Thaumaturge Barding Aura, let's just say I'm not using those. And so let's say we have Master at Arms, Deadly Aim, Minor Slayer, Minor Berserk, Major Berserk. So whatever your damage done buffs are, you will want to include those in that skill. There are other damage done buffs. For example, if you have Prey as a sorcerer, it buffs your pets by another 45%. So what you would do is you would take all of these into consideration, and then, so all of these are adding up to roughly 42%, right? Take all of those into consideration, and then you also add another, plus 45% because that's how much Prey buffs it. So if it were Prey, if it were a pet, this is how much Prey would buff it, right? So that would add up here. This is the important distinction to make. They all stack up together. They don't multiply together, they add together. Okay, very important part of the calculation. So let's say we have these buffs, so that adds up to 42% damage done. Okay, so we're going to write that in here. Let's say we have 42% damage done. So what you do is you multiply by 1.42. Okay, 42% is 1.42 multiplier increase. So after damage done buffs, your crystal frag will actually deal this multiplied by this. Okay, so this is how our how much damage our crystal frag is currently doing. Now, we have added the damage done buffs. Now we need to add damage taken debuffs. Okay, so when the boss or the enemy has some damage taken debuffs, these two will stack separately, and they will stack multiplicatively. Right? That is important. 42%, all of the damage done buffs, and then if it's damage taken, so if we go to the enemy, right, there will most likely be minor vulnerability, major vulnerability. Okay, those are your two main debuffs on the enemy. So that's 5% from minor, 10% from major. This is what has on the training dummy. If you want in actual trials, you can add martial knowledge for another 8%, or you can add Zen for another 5% damage done. Sorry, damage taken. But for now, let's just assume we're parsing on the trial dummy. So that would be 15% in total of damage taken. Important part to note is that for specific damage types, there might also be different things. Mainly, I'm thinking something like if you have engulfing flames, right? I believe this is a debuff on the enemy, which makes them take 6% more flame damage, right? So any skill, any damage type that is flame will be taking, instead of just 15 like we have here, it would be taking 15 plus the additional 6. But I don't remember if it's damage done or if it's damage taken. I believe it's damage taken, but I'm not entirely sure. So just make sure you make that important distinction when you're doing your calculations. So if we have damage taken debuffs, you need to also take this and go, if it's 15%, we write 1.15. Okay, so we multiply this skill again by another 1.15, right? So the damage is going up. I will this just so it's a bit easier to do. So, if we start with 12,000 damage, but if we're taking into consideration all the buffs, then we're going up to 20,000. So damage done buffs damage taken debuffs. These two multiply together. Now, next thing that is important is we also need to take into consideration that the enemy has armor. Okay, so there will be an armor modifier that will reduce this damage. So if the enemy's armor is 0, this armor modifier is just 1. So nothing changes. So we take this damage and we multiply by the armor modifier. However, depending on how much armor the enemy has, there will be a damage reduction. So what you need to remember is that every 500 armor is equivalent to 1% damage reduction. Okay? That is for PvE enemies. This scales with level, and PvE enemies are considered to be level 50. If it's players, I believe this would be 640 because you're technically level 64. It's more looking at the attributes. I don't play PvP, so take this with a grain of sand. Salt. What? I don't like sand. Forest and dry and gets everywhere. So 640. I'm talking PvE. I don't want to get too much into PvP. I don't play PvP. I'm not confident enough to be able to explain PvP. We're talking PvE. Okay, so monsters. 500 armor, 1% damage reduction. In the vast majority of content, enemies will have 18,200 armor. Okay, that's all of your trials. Every single enemy in a trial has 18,200. In overland contents, they will have a little bit less. I think it's 9,100. I'm not sure. It's about 9,000, but I would assume it's just half of that. And in the Maelstrom Arena and Veteran Hollows, there will be even less. There's some enemies. There is a good article on ESO University that has written every single enemy, but those I believe are the only ones where it's not 18,200. So almost all enemies, especially if we're min-maxing for trials and things like that, 18,200. So if the enemies has 18,200, that is how much, if you want to figure out how much damage reduction that is, right? So this is, you take the enemy armor and you divide by 500. That will get you to 36.4%. To convert this into a percentage, because right now it's just 36.4, we add 2 more zeros. Okay, so that's 0.364. That is considered to be 36.4%. If I click on this and I convert it to percentage, you see that's 36.4. So that is how much we're reducing the damage by. Okay, so our modifier, armor modifier, is going to be 1 minus this number. 1 sec, equals 1 minus this number. Okay, so if let's just write this in here. So 18,200, just so I can use that instead of magic numbers. Okay, so if my armor is 18,200, I will have 36% damage reduction, which means I need to multiply my damage done by only 63%. Right? So instead of the 20,000 damage we would be doing normally with the crystal frag, we're only doing 63.6% of that damage. So that's why you want to try to reduce the enemy damage. Reduce the enemy armor. There's 2 ways you can deal with that. There will be debuffs on the enemy where you can reduce their armor, or if you stack armor penetration as your stat, this will also take away the armor. So if we look at something like the player here, I think I need to actually go to enemy. So there will be, where is it? Enemy right here. So major breach, minor breach coming from the tanks, right? These two, 5,948. Minor breach 2,974, infused crusher minus 2,108, and alkosh minus 6,000. Right, there's other sources. You can do Crimson Oath, you can do Tremor Scale, but these are the ones that are present on the trial dummy. So all of this takes away a lot of armor, and then the enemy is left only with this much armor, 1170. Okay, so let's say the enemy is at 1170 armor, then the damage reduction is only 2.34%. Right, so your armor modifier is just 97. So the enemy is taking 97.66% of the damage you're doing to it. Okay. So, ideally you would reach your penetration cap of making sure the enemy has 0 armor. It'll make things a little bit easier. But this is our armor modifier. I will just toss it over here. So we need to take that into consideration as well. Damage done, damage taken, armor modifier. Now, there's one more thing that will affect the damage you deal, which is we need to consider crits. Okay, so you will have some crit chance, and your attacks can crit. Most attacks can crit, some cannot. I know, for example, the Reliquant set cannot crit. So that's another thing to keep in mind, but whatever your hit is, so let's say my Crystal Frag is hitting for this much after we've done all the damage calculations with it, 19,949, right? So if I were to write non-crit, it would be this much. If it were to be a crit, we also need to consider critical damage. Every character starts with 50% bonus critical damage. Okay, that is a bonus, 50%. So instead of doing 19,941, you would actually take this number increased by 50%. So that's multiplied by 1 plus 50%. Okay, so that's 29,000 if it is a crit. However, we can increase this critical damage with buffs and debuffs on the enemy. So if we look at here, there are going to be some buffs. Minor Brittle, right? Debuff on the enemy makes them take 10% more crit damage. Elemental Catalyst is a set that makes them take 15%, up to 15%. Okay? It's 5% per element. So lightning, fire, and ice. That's 25% extra crit damage for you. Then there will be more from the player you can do yourself. So, where's my crit damage? There we go. Medium armor, right? If you're wearing any medium, you are doing more crit damage. If you're a Khajiit, you get a bonus. Minor Force, Major Force are the 2 buffs. Killed, Fighting, Finesse, CPs, Backstabber, there might be more. There's some passives. What is it? Nightblades, I believe, have it. Or is it Necros? Sorkbrain. Okay, Sorkbrain. But yeah, so you can increase your crit damage. However, there is a cap at crit damage. So your maximum crit damage that you can have is 125% bonus crit damage. Okay, if you go over cap, if you have 135, what will happen is it will ignore the extra 10%. Okay, your maximum value is 125. It will not go over. It will go over that. It will say you have 135% crit damage, but it will not actually consider it in damage calculation. So the maximum value is 125. Okay, try to reach that cap. So if we are at the maximum value, 125%, then our crit crystal frag would actually hit for 44,000 instead of 19,000, which is the non-crit. Okay, so that's basically your final value. If you see this, if we have considered everything, damage done, damage taken, armor modifier. If your math is correct, these are the actual numbers you will see in game. Non-crit 19,000, crit 44,000. Right? So, oops, I just moved this on accident. How is this useful? There is a thing that I like to calculate, and some other players like to as well. Shoutouts to the Asian God and Skinny Cheeks, who have been using these numbers a lot to calculate, and also it has showed up on the UESP, which is the ability metric. Ability metric is, I believe, what they called it. So what it is, people take basically your raw stat increase and what the expected value of your skills would be. Basically, how valuable your stats are, kind of condensed into a single number. So what we do is, of course, we take whatever our max resource is. Okay, we take that, we add whatever our max damage is. But as I said, max damage is more valuable than the max resource. So we multiply this. What was the ratio? 10.5. Right? So we multiply this by 10.5. So 8,000 spell damage is not the same as 33,000 max stamina because we need to kind of buff up this. It's more valuable, right? The spell damage. So that is it. Actually, I forgot one more thing, which is that this crystal frag, this is the value it will do. Okay. However, there's one more thing which I missed, which is the skill rank 4 modifier, 3.3%. Some skills will scale up with their rank. So if it's rank 1, it will do nothing extra, but as you rank it up to level 2, 3, and 4, you will gain a little bit more damage. So actually, crystal frags will go up, and if it's 3.3 extra, what we do is we multiply by 1.033. So that's 3.3 extra percent. Okay, so it would be a little bit more damage if it's on rank 4. So it's actually this number rather than what I had before. Okay. Now, so we take this ability metric. Just a little side note. Sorry about it being late. So we take the ability metric, right? We consider max stamina and spell damage. Okay, so I'll just kind of try to walk through it slower. So max stam and spell damage. Actually, I'll call it max resource and max damage is what I will call it. Okay, so this is that. Then we take that and we consider a damage multiplier, right? So the damage multiplier is whatever damage we're doing, and we multiply it by our damage done, so 1.42, and multiply by our damage taken, 1.15. So 40% extra damage done, 15% extra damage taken. These two are multiplied together. So the ability metric is going up, right? We're at 91,000. Then that's damage multiplier. Then we add the armor multiplier. So this is more of a damage reduction, right? Depending on how much penetration you have and whatnot. So if we take that into consideration, we actually take this number that we had before, and we need to reduce it by whatever the armor modifier is. So, you know, if the enemy only has 1100 armor, then the damage reduction is not too bad, but it's still in there. We need to consider it. So max resource, damage multiplier, armor multiplier, and then crit. Okay, so this one is a little bit tricky because how do you figure out if you're critting or not critting? So what we need to do is we need to consider our crit chance. Okay, so crit chance as well as our crit damage. So crit chance is a little bit weird in the game. However, you might see sometimes things like crit value. I'll write that in here. So crit value, which is going to be, like a line of crit will give you 633 crit. What is that? What does that mean? So to figure out how much that is, what you actually need to do is a really weird number, is you take this crit value and you divide by 21912. 192, is it? Oh my god, I don't remember. 21912. Yeah. To get the exact value, convert this to percentages. So this is actually 2.89%. I hope I got that right. Oh, let me double check that. Because I did the calculations here before. Crit damage, crit value. So yeah, 21912. Yes. So but the number, yeah, that's why this number looked weird. Because one line of crit is actually 657. So if you have one line of crit chances, 657, that's 3%. Okay. So essentially 219.12, if you want to be very precise, is equivalent to 1% of crit. Okay? 219 is 1% of crit. So crit chance, we need to take that into consideration. So if we have something like, let's say what our standard stats are, right? So minor prophecy, savagery, we get this much crit from them. Precision champion points, another 1.46. Daggers, if you're wearing daggers, you get 7.41 with dual wield daggers, extra crit chance. You might have precise, so that's 3.6 extra, but I generally wouldn't run any precise in the current patch. And then your Thief Mundus, which gives you crit chance. So that's 6.08% crit chance. And then if you have any divine pieces on your body, this amplifies your Mundus Stone, which gives you a 3.88% extra if you add 7 divine pieces. So this is kind of the general meta setup for the current patch that you would have. So that's roughly 50.8%. Okay, so if we go here and let's say we have 50.8% crit chance, then we look at how much crit damage we have. Let's say we have 125% crit damage, so we're at the cap of our crit multiplier is, I should actually add that in here. So crit multiplier will be, so basically, our skills are doing however much, so this much damage, right? Let's say our crystal frag is doing this much damage. Now, if we multiply by 1, nothing changes. So this is the amount of times we don't get a crit. We just multiply by 1. But 50% of the time, we will get 125% extra damage. So we add that and you multiply them together like this. So you take your damage done, you multiply by 1 plus your crit chance multiplied by your crit damage. Okay? And this number that we have right here is kind of your expected value on average. You can think of it, right? So your non-crits are 20,000, your crits are 46,000. Your average hit each time is going to be roughly 33,000. If you were to do 100 spells, some of them are going to be 20,000, some of them are going to be 46, but on average, it would be about 33,000 per spell. Hopefully that makes sense. So, to consider how well our stats are doing, we can take a look at this. And so we take our armor multiplier. So we take this, so max resource scaling, damage multiplier, armor multiplier, and then crit multiplier. This is what we're taking into consideration. And we take this number and we multiply by, oh, I already did that in here. So 1 plus crit chance multiplied by, whoops, multiplied by crit damage. Okay. Actually, like a pretty significant boost to the expected damage increase. I will just make numbers a little bit neater. Format, number. There we go. And I don't want to show decimal points. So yeah, these are your ability metrics. And this is kind of how I would calculate how valuable your stats are, really. Right? So these are all the damage stats you need to consider. They come at different values. If we're thinking in terms of lines, so like one gear set piece can give you 1096 max resource, right? So like max magicka, or 129 spell damage, or 1487 penetration? Question mark? I think something like that. Or actually, I will put this down here. 633 crit. Oh, it's not 633. What was the value? I'm so bad with these numbers. 657. Right? So, or 657 crit chance, or this much penetration. Okay, so if we're to take a look at these are in order of priority from lowest to highest. Okay, so if we're just looking at raw stat gain, this is what we meant where we say penetration is the most valuable, then you go crit chance, then you go spell damage, or spell slash weapon damage, and max mag slash stam. Also, this can be spell crit or weapon crit. Okay, and this can also be magical or physical penetration. These are getting hybridized now. It doesn't really matter too much, but it will also take whichever of the two is higher. Okay, so penetration is the most valuable if we're thinking 1487, so that one line of penetration. Of course, if you had 3000 crit chance compared to 1000 penetration, this is way better. Okay, so these are just minor differences between them. And from our calculations, this was roughly 3% damage increase. This was about 2.8%, something like that. I don't remember exactly. This was looking at, this was like 2%, and this was like 1% damage increase. Okay, something like that. There will be, take these numbers again with a grain of salt. Okay, this will highly depend on your class, on your other stats. As you can see, everything affects it. Right? There's a lot of things that affect it. These are kind of just raw, rough estimates. I don't want to put these here because they're very rough estimates. Now, there's another stat that you might want to take into consideration that's even better than this, and this is any kind of damage percent increases. There can also be crit damage here. Okay, but damage percent increases, so things like a minor slayer buff. Right, where is that? In damage done is huge. Okay, that's 5% damage increase. Where's my, there it is. Minor slayer, right? 5%. You might get that as a line. So that will be even better, even higher priority than penetration. Okay. Of course, these are capped. So penetration at 18,200 max, crit damage capped at 125%. So yeah, this will be your final ability metric, and then you can do things like comparing builds, right? So if I were to compare, let's say I have a max resource, I was just recently comparing these, where I have max resource of 37,000 compared to something like 36,000, but slightly, actually lower crit chance. Like, what is this? This seems wrong. Ah, it seems wrong right here. Yeah, so I wanted to see something like that. Okay, never mind. Doesn't matter. This is slightly scuffed, but I believe this should be the same because the crit modifier is, yeah, it's just copying the same crit modifier. So let's say the only difference would be if we ignore these. Um, the only difference would be one has, I believe this is one extra line of Max Magica. Yeah, so -1096. So what is the difference, right? What if you have 37,000, all of these stats, your ability metrics is this, right? What 319,000. And then you have another build that gives you 320,000 ability metrics. Well, the DPS difference, you just divide these two together, right? The DPS difference is going to be 0.216. So what I did there is I take one stat, so this one, 320,000, divide by 319,000, and you subtract 1 minus 1. Or if you don't subtract it, it's just, you say, well, this one is doing 0.216% more than the other one. So not a huge difference. You think about it, right? Not a massive difference. Yeah, went a little bit over there. I think I talked too much, but hopefully this clears things up a little bit. Yeah, I just really want to make sure people understand how the damage calculations are done. One important distinction to make is how all of these are scaling and how the damage done and damage taken buffs are adding together. I was recently a calculation I was making, which was, where is this? Skills? Yeah. There was a recently calculation I was making for rapid strikes, for example, compared to Twilight Tormentor. I wanted to see if it's worth casting. So rapid strikes, the way they work is you add 5% extra damage done with every hit. So you cast rapid strikes and it hits 4 times, while every next hit deals 5% extra. So what you need to think about is that this is taking into consideration already all of your damage done buffs, right? So if I have 36% from other buffs, like right here I have 42%, right? So maybe I would add 42% in there instead, but let's say all of this is adding up to be 36, then you need to add this with addition, not multiplication. Okay, very, very important distinction. A lot of people make the mistakes where they multiply things together, and that gets them wrong numbers. So these are the numbers. Okay, 36, then you add 5% extra, 5% extra, 5% extra. Same thing here with Twilight Tormentor. Prey adds 45% bonus damage. So if you have 36%, you add 45 here. If you activate Twilight Tormentor, if you activate Twilight Tormentor, that is another 60%. Whoop. That is another plus 60%. Oh my god, what is this? Plus 60%. Okay? Extra. So if it's another 60% extra, you have to add it over here. Already including the previous buffs. So it would be 141% extra damage. So plus 45% from Prey, plus 60% from the Twilight Tormentor activation. That's how these damage calculations are done. Okay. Hopefully this clears things up a bit. Share this video with others if you want. I'm not doing this for me. I want to educate the ESO community. I really hope more people learn such things so they can optimize a bit better and that we can stop arguing. Okay. Goodbye, everyone. Thank you for watching.